Welcome to the cock and balls opening. This is the compensation variation. Now it follows the main line of the cock and balls pretty much through and through. However, there are some deviations early on in the game. If you haven't seen the cock and balls opening main line, I would urge you to check it out on my channel now. Anyways, so it starts off with e4, e6, the French defense. d4, crafting the shaft. Now you may be wondering, what are we compensating for? Well, we will be extending the tip of our shaft eventually in order to facilitate the win and also to expand in the center. You'll see what I'm talking about very soon. However, this does come at the price of a ball. So, not to linger on that for too long, black normally responds with d5. So after d5, we normally play bishop to d3, following along with the main line of the cock and ball. We're not going to cover the c5 line because this isn't the French defense. Ultimately, the position ends up the same. It just takes us a couple of moves longer to make the cock and the balls. That being said, the move that we will be covering instead is knight to c6, for which we'll be defending our pawn on d4 with bishop to e3, further expanding our shaft. After knight to f6, we don't push e5 immediately. That is an amateur way of playing this, as I said before. Instead, we develop the girth of our cock with pawn to f3. Sometimes you'll see bishop to b4 check, developing the bishop with tempo and a check. We play c3, once again, using one of our girth pawns in order to defend against this check and also to support our center. After bishop to a5, we have our first deviation from the main line of the cock and balls. We play pawn to b4, immediately kicking away the bishop. After bishop back to b6, we play knight to e2. After knight to e2, we normally see some castles action here, and we don't castle ourselves. We play knight to d2, creating our full cock. All we need are some balls. After bishop to d7, developing the bishop, we play castles ourselves, creating our first ball. After d takes e4, f takes e4, normally black will play something like e5. e5 basically threatening to destroy our cock even further, trying to dismantle it, break it down, but we ignore all of that when we play rook to c1, creating our full cock and balls. I mean, this is quite magnificent in and of itself, but our queen hasn't been developed. So the difference between this cock and the cock that you would get from the main line is that the queen is not developed to b3, and there is a threat on the tip of our cock. However, it is still quite magnificent in and of itself. So after pawn takes d4, c takes d4, now black will play something like knight to g4, as we've covered in the main line of the cock and balls. To defend our bishop and defend the integrity of our cock, we want to move our bishop around the board like this. But in this case, black does not play g5 after we've moved our bishop. In this case, black might play queen to h4, another deviation from the cock and balls, threatening to put some pressure, maybe checkmate, maybe g5, and then maybe threaten checkmate after bishop there, knight takes. This is a threat of checkmate. But now we make the necessary sacrifice. Rook takes c6, bishop takes c6. Now the reason why we do this is to alleviate some pressure from d4 and allow ourselves to keep this bishop along this diagonal. So it is defending the h2 square, and the knight is still defending d4, where there's only one attacker here. Obviously the rook can come to d8, but we can easily bring a defender across to the d4 pawn regardless. We just need our bishop where it is to defend h2. So that's the point of this. After pawn to b5, kicking away the bishop, we want to, obviously defend the bishop first. But we want to kick away the knight with h3. In the cock and balls, knight came back to f6, and in this line, knight will go back to h6, and it makes more sense. We don't want to allow this pawn to e5 to come with tempo, which we will be eventually developing. After a4, supporting the b5 pawn, allowing ourselves to move this bishop potentially to this diagonal and put pressure on f7 later on. Black will normally play queen to e7 for fear of the cock. At this point, we are no longer capable of reconstructing our cock with one ball, because if we were to do so, there's this tricky knight to f5 move. Because knight to f5 doesn't allow us to take this way because we'd be hanging a bishop and then a pawn afterwards. So at this here we have to play something like queen to b3, the automatic move of the cock and balls. Remember this one, as I said before, you need to be playing this in every single position that you get with the cock and balls. And if you look at the position now, black is kind of out of moves, or out of options. There is a pretty significant attack on the king side. I mean, look at how these pieces are positioned. The cock is truly formidably attacking here. That being said, black has to play something like queen to e6. offering a trade of queens, and there is no pawn to d5 because the bishop is pinning the pawn to the king. Queen to e6 does allow us to play bishop to e3, reconstructing our full cock. but we want to first move our queen out of the way. So queen to c3 first. And if black is uninterested in a draw, they'll play something like pawn to c6, potentially disrupting our queen side. Now we can reconstruct our cock, however we are down a ball, though the attack is still quite powerful. After c takes b5, a takes b5, bishop obviously can't take back because the bishop is defending. But rook to c8, attacking the queen. Quite a natural move and actually quite a good move. But after queen to b4, putting pressure on this rook, potentially bringing the queen to e7 at some point. Pawn to f5 looks like it allows us to play pawn to e5 and expand the tip of our cock immediately. However, there is a better move here, and that is knight to f4. After knight to f4, queen can come back to e8. Of course, they can't come to e7 now because the queen is covering e7. And now we can play e5, and now we've expanded the tip of our cock. So the tip is the most important part of the cock and balls, and as you can see in this position, expanding it is crucial to gain the victory in the game. And now after king to h8, removing the threat of this bishop c4 check, potentially bringing the bishop here with tempo and also then pushing e6, we play knight to c4. Knight to c4 is preparing knight to d6, attacking both the queen and the rook simultaneously. Of course, you can defend against the threat with bishop to c7, temporarily prevents knight to d6 without any trouble because the bishop can take, of course. But after b6, a takes b6, this knight can jump into d5. Of course, at this point, we have moved away from the opening, so all variations of your cocks have been developed. That is 2 balls, 1 ball, and expanded tip. You know, now we're just capitalizing on our attack. So after bishop to b8, defending the bishop, now knight takes b6. So knight takes b6, attacks the rook, but the rook can easily come to d8 and then also defend the bishop if necessary, if the queen needs to come into the attack this way or whatever it may be. So rook will come to d8 at this point. I mean, there's no real better move for the rook to go to. And after knight takes d7, queen takes d7, you have still got the formidable attack. After knight to f4, obviously defending the knight, which was under attack. There is no real move here because there's rook there and then you lose a knight. Rook to c8, occupying the open c file. After bishop c4, putting this bishop along this diagonal, preparing maybe knight to e6 or pawn to e6. So at this point in the game, black would probably resign. There's very little you can do to prevent this from coming with a lot of trouble. I mean, rook to c1 is coming if you try to save your queen and rook skewer, which would eventually lead to winning the game. I mean, this queen is eyeing up this rook. There's just too much going on in this position. Obviously, this rook can never take this way because this would end up losing this rook. I mean, there's so much going on that I believe black would resign. So at this point, it's probably best to allow this skewer. I mean, even the engine agrees, telling me to play knight to g8 here. So let's see what happens if knight to g8 happens on the board. After knight to g8, obviously bishop to e6, skewering the queen and the rook together. Queen can come to e7, offering a trade of queens. Queen takes e7, knight takes e7, bishop takes c8, and then rook takes c8. And here it looks like maybe there's some counterplay. The pawns are equal. If you count the pawns, there's 4 pawns on black side and four pawns for white. However, white has 2 central passed pawns. And these 2 central passed pawns will be crucial for winning this game. So after rook to b1, attacking the b7 pawn here, there's not really a great way of defending it whilst also maintaining development of your pieces. So it's best to just give it up and play g5 instead, creating an attack on the knight. After knight to e6, it's best not to overcomplicate and try to defend the c7 pawn. I mean, the engine still agrees with me at this point. It's best to play h6 here. Give up the pawn because it's just too easy to pile up on it with all of these pieces. So after rook takes b7, obviously you have to take this knight, after you move this knight. But here there's a little bit of a trick in the position. Obviously the knight comes to attack the bishop saves itself, and here rook to e8, attacking the knight. If knight comes to g7, now you have this tricky looking move, rook to e7. After rook takes b8, it's obviously not giving up a bishop completely, because after rook takes b8, king takes g7. King takes g7, and now you're still got equal material entirely, but as I said before, white's central pawns are too strong. After h4, attacking this pawn chain, giving up a pawn obviously temporarily. G takes h4, and now rook to d8. Rook to d8 attacking the knight. Knight saves itself, and now rook to d6. After rook to d6, you're allowing a fork, but it's actually temporary once again because bishop takes h6, comes with check. After king saves itself, you play bishop to g5. Bishop to g5 attacking the rook. Knight takes d6, and bishop takes e7. Bishop takes e7, and if you look at this, this is equal, but the two passed pawns are too strong, and it's not going to be very long before black completely loses this game or potentially even resigns. So just to show you how it might play out at this point, the pawns might push. These are all best engine moves, by the way. I wouldn't play a3 here, so it is clearly an engine move. After pawn to g4, there's very little you can do to stop this. Maybe knight to here, defending the e8 square, but king comes across, and there's very little you can do to stop these pawns being saved. Obviously, the knight can't move because it's defending this square. The bishop is covering the pawn chain here. It's completely winning. I mean, you're just going to walk into the position, just going to pick up these pawns, potentially even go this way, pick up these pawns, and just win the game. So that was the cock and balls compensation variation. We did get a longer cock. We gave up a ball. It was quite the emotional roller coaster, but as I said before, cock and balls is a formidable position. A lot of people underestimate it. But anyways, if you enjoyed the video, I hope you like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and thank you for watching, and have a good day.